What's going on, guys? Today we're going to start right off, get into it. PC specs, the minimum specs you can have if you want to run the game, the recommended 60 FPS plus, and more importantly the max settings, what you're going to need. We also have leaked PC recommendations and minimum specs for Cold War and how big the game is going to be to get all your storage needs. Let's get right into it. As you can see, Google actually recommends some very low settings, so we're going to get right into it. Go look at the Call of Duty settings because we know that 175 gigabytes isn't even enough to run Warzone. So let's get right into it. Minimum specs. They're saying an Intel Core i3 4340 and 8 gigabytes RAM. Again, here you see at least 246 gigabytes of space, and we know the game's only getting bigger with the release of Cold War. We'll get into it, but you're going to need upwards of 400 to 500 gigabytes to end up actually running everything. So let's look at your recommended specs for around 60 FPS. We know that with the new updates, this is going to be dropping in some of the more higher detail areas like downtown and hospital. So let's get right into it. They recommend at least having an Intel Core i5 2500 or Ryzen R5 1600X for your CPU. They're going to recommend at least 12 gigabytes of RAM. And as many of you know, if you really want to push it, you're going to need to get at least 16 gigabytes of RAM to help out your computer. Again, 246 gigabytes of space just for this game. I recommend getting an external at least 1 to 2 terabytes if you continue to plan on playing Call of Duty. They recommend the Geforce GTX 970 or the AMD RX 580. But let's get right into the competitive settings. You want to compete at the top of your game, you're going to need an Intel i7 or at least a Ryzen 1800, 16 gigabytes of RAM. Again, lots of space. And as many of you know, you need a Geforce GTX 1080 or the RTX 2070 Super. Now, these might be worth the investment because right after this, we're going to get into what Call of Duty has recommended for the Cold War, which is their newest release coming out. Again, we have our minimum requirements and our competitive requirements. So for the minimum requirements, they're not even going to put Windows 7 on the list. It's time for Windows 10, people. Let's get up to it. They're saying an Intel iCore i5 2500 will still be able to run Cold War, which is very interesting, but they do recommend most likely getting a Core i7 or a Ryzen R5 1600 as well. They're saying a GeForce GTX 670 and GeForce GTX 1650 will actually be able to run Cold War, which is lower than expected, which means that this game actually might be more optimized than the current Call of Duty Modern Warfare. They're saying you will be able to actually play with 8 gigabytes of RAM, which is the same minimum as the current Modern Warfare, which is pretty interesting. We know the beta came out at 45 gigabytes, which was comparably smaller than Modern Warfare's. And we do have a rough estimate of how large this game is going to be, not including Warzone. So we've done our own math to figure that out. We're just going to finish up going through the list of the minimum requirements. If you're playing on an old laptop, an old computer, if you can only upgrade piece by piece, Cold War still will be for you. Here are all the minimums. You can pause and read these if you need, but let's get right into the PC requirements for competitive play. We're talking 60 plus FPS guaranteed and the new optimized Call of Duty Cold War. Let's get right into it. An Intel i7 8700 or an AMD Ryzen 1800X will be fine for 60 plus FPS, which is a very big surprise. But to no surprise, we know if you want to run these high FPS, you're going to need at least a GeForce GTX 1080, RTX 2070 Super, and we know the Geforce Nvidia GTX 1090s just came out if you really want to spend the money. So these most likely are going to be the GPUs of the future, and you're going to need to run these to have 60 plus FPS. Now the game itself, they're recommending 175 gigabytes and at least 16 gigabytes of RAM to be running. Now as you can see, some side notes down here, the same game engine used in Call of Duty Black Ops will use the same as Modern Warfare, thus having similar spec requirements as the previous game. However, it might require higher baseline hardware. This means that if you have hardware that might work on Cold War, Warzone might still be too hard on the computer, as we know it was very poorly optimized. We see that Cold War itself is around 100 gigabytes, and we know that Modern Warfare is approaching 250, meaning you're going to need at least 350 gigabytes on launch day to continue to run both of these games. With expansions, DLCs, zombies, we know it's going to get nuts. Now, just to show the FPS differential, we have a video of Nickmercs here. His FPS is actually dropping between 220 and 150. So we're seeing 70 FPS frames being dropped, and I believe he's running the brand new 1090. So as you can see, if you have an old laptop and you're losing frames or anything, don't sweat it. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you guys are excited for Cold War. Get those gigabytes and gigabytes ready for the storage it's going to take. Save up, get those PC parts, and in this crazy time, in the crazy world we're living, you know, go slay, go love each other, and until next time, man, have a good one.